Welcome to Mindful Management, Creating a Trauma-Informed Work Environment, a podcast by Chefalo Consulting, where we share the knowledge, stories, and resources you need to create a trauma-informed culture that supports wellness, growth, and resilience. I'm your host, Shenandoah Chefalo. Welcome, friends. We're so glad that you're tuning in for another episode of our podcast. It's been amazing to start seeing your comments come in about all the content and everything that we're doing and our guest. And for me, today is no different. I'm super excited to introduce you to someone that I consider a colleague and friend, someone that I've had the joy of working with for, the last couple of years at least. It feels longer some days. But let's get started because I can't wait for you to hear from her and all of her amazing insights. So on today's episode of Mindful Management, Creating a Trauma-Informed Work Environment, we are delighted to welcome Nicolle Brooks Willis. Nicolle has carved out a distinctive career within the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, where she serves currently as a project manager of the Employee Services team. She has a rich background that includes roles from various positions across the department, deputy warden, and now project management. Nicolle has been at the forefront of integrating trauma-informed care within the correctional facilities. Her work aims to transform the rehabilitation environment into one that's sensitive to the psychological and emotional needs of all employees, because ultimately that's what we're looking for, joy in work again, being happy with the stuff we do. I am thrilled to welcome Nicolle, but here is one thing you won't know about Nicolle that I will tell you. If she recommends a movie to you and you choose to watch it, know you will likely be angry later. So, Nicolle, welcome. We're so glad to have you on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me. And what an introduction, Shin. My movie choices are a little bit suspect, but don't hold it against me.
They're all excellent. You will be, it's 2 hours well spent, but I just think we should tell our listeners beforehand, because I know you'll recommend something during our podcast today. You will probably leave mad at the end. And if you're like me, texting Nicolle, what is this thing you've just made me watch? So I'm thrilled to have you here. I'm really excited to talk about everything that you're doing at the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections. But start off, what even drew you to corrections in the first place, Nicolle? I think a lot of people who might be watching or listening are like, yeah, what draws women to corrections in the first place? So how did you get involved in corrections?
Well, I started in corrections in 1998. I was a paid college intern at the time, so my degrees are in social work. So I was studying at the Ohio State University in social work, and I knew that ODRC, Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, had this opportunity, honestly, for a paid internship. And I was like, okay, let's do this, right? Because most internships at that time were not paid. And I started there at the Corrections Training Academy that summer and never really turned back.
Yeah, so it's a thing, right? Money talks. And so a paid internship is going to appeal to a lot of people. And you have kind of a diverse role because of your work in corrections, but you're also an event planner. I learned it recently. You're a Zumba instructor. These are things that don't always seem like they fit together. So how does your passion for community well-being tie into the work that you do and the work that you love in corrections?
It's interesting, Shin, because you say community well-being, and I would say that I'm the community, right? So any of the passion and anything that I am doing at work or even in the community with teaching Zumba or event planning, it really started off as something that I needed to do to get better with myself. And I needed to learn about myself, challenge myself. And so it is really through the feeling of wanting to heal thyself that I've come to all of this work.
Yeah, I think that's the theme that we've heard from a lot of our guests, right? And myself included, which is inside out work. I mean, you've heard me say it countless times as well, is is it takes us to be healed to then help others to heal. I'm guessing when you started at the Ohio State, which should be a shout out for me. Now, I've also allowed U of M alumni, Ohio State alumni on a podcast from a Michigan State alumni. So it tells you how nice I am, what a nice person I am, how generous I am. But I would guess at that time, you did not learn about trauma-informed work in your social work program.
No, no, we weren't really talking about trauma then at that point in my education. Of course, some of the practices and skills we learned include trauma, but no one was using the terminology. We just weren't talking about it.
So how did it come about at ODRC? How did you decide, hey, from an employee services lens, we're going to go full bore trauma informed?
That's an interesting story too, because back in 2019, our director, Annette Chambers-Smith, was appointed as director of our agency, and she decided that she wanted to create a division of HR, human resources in our agency that was just focused on employees. So it was really her vision for that. And I think that was really born out of her core values that she has for the agency. The first one is taking care of staff. They will transform the offenders. One team, one purpose, civility towards all, and hope is job one. So out of the gate, as soon as she came into our agency as the director, the first core value was taking care of staff. And so it was her vision to have this employee services team out of HR that would just focus on how to get people healthy, how to make sure that our staff was healed and well, because she knew and she had that foresight that if the staff is doing well, if the staff is happy, if the staff is healthy, that will translate to the incarcerated. And so it was her vision that she created this area and appointed me for that position in 2019.
That's amazing. And I know her number one thing is take care of staff, but you said another one in there that I just think resonates and intertwines so beautifully, which is hope is job number one. Because I think hope, especially when we're talking about corrections and listen, my 2 years of hanging around at ODRC and its staff, we can lose touch with that for each other as colleagues very quickly because of the nature of the work, I guess.
It's a big part of what we do. And oftentimes, even when she rolled out those core values, our staff had a hard time wrapping their mind around the idea that it wasn't just about the incarcerated, that it truly was about us as an agency as a whole, all of the people in the agency, including employees. And when you think about hope being job one, we've oftentimes said that for years in our agency when it came to the incarcerated, but our employees have to have that hope too.
Yeah, I think that's such a big thing. So she gives you this idea of, Nicolle, go make everyone trauma informed. What did you think?
I thought she was a little bit crazy, or over optimistic about it, because at the time when I, had the meeting with her and she said, everyone needs to be trauma informed. I want all of our employees to be trauma informed. And I kind of sat back and I remember kind of snickering because I'm thinking, what in the world? How will we do that? And I said, well, I believe that everything we do and everything that my office will do will push forward practices that are trauma informed. And she said, no, I want everyone to be educated. I want everyone to be trauma informed. And so the beautiful thing about that is it allowed me an opportunity to start thinking creatively and out of the box of how are we going to actually do that? How will we implement that in an agency of over 11,000 employees with 28 prisons across Ohio? And so I had some time to sit back and to start thinking about it and realize that the key was that first we needed to start having even trauma in the language. And how would we do that with 11,000 employees? And so honestly, Shen, we started off really small and we just started to train people in our annual in-service training through e-learnings, just in 1 hour segment of just like, what is trauma? What are we talking about? Just to get people used to even having that word and using that language. And that's how it started.
And moving away from, because we've seen this challenge, you and I, and the many trainings that we've done with staff was like, wait, I thought I was coming to learn how to put on a tourniquet. I mean, this is a question we have faced more than one time from staff members. But it's interesting because I remember the last time a staff member said that at one of our training events, and somebody looked to him and said, "This is the emotional tourniquet." And I was like, yeah, like that is kind of a really good way to look at it. Cause I think in corrections, right, there's this idea about physical safety, about physical things that are happening. And I think that's one of the unique challenges about doing this work is really trying to talk about the psychological, emotional toll of the work that happens as well. So 11,000 staff is a lot. So for a lot of the people listening, they feel like they're trying to implement trauma informed in their departments. Some have bigger, some have much smaller. What do you think it means to be trauma informed in the context of ODRC? Like, what does that look like?
So, and you said it earlier, and when you really start to think about trauma informed care and trauma informed practices, it's inside out work. And it really starts with the individual. And so I think that so often historically in corrections and even in our department, you know, we were taught very early on that this is tough work. We hear that all the time. It's tough work. You got to come in with your game face on. You don't share your personal stories. Don't let them see you be weak. Don't be vulnerable. We were kind of taught that. And there's a place for that, right? We do have to come in strong. We have to be security focused. This is a prison system. But what we lost there, I think, was the personal element that we too are humans. We come in here with families. We come in here with our own trauma. And it doesn't just cut off when you walk in the door.
That's such a big piece. And I think that's one of the another big hurdle in corrections. And how do you think using trauma informed differs from maybe traditional methods that are being used kind of across the nation in corrections for staff?
I think that it's different because, again, it starts to look at each individual and allows them the space to connect with their own healing process. And honestly, when you start to connect with your own healing process or just examining things around trauma, you really begin to understand each other in that. So you understand the value of relationships, the value of connections. You begin to value that you need to be empathetic towards each other. It's things that seem very simple, but it's very hard for us to do. We're not really taught that.
No, it's almost the opposite of what we're taught, right? Which is just bottle it up and move forward and keep work at work and home at home and all of those things that, regardless of where you work, kind of fit that mold of like, don't bring it home with you pieces, and it negatively affects us. So I've had the joy of working with you for, I think we just said like this November is 2 years of this project and of this work. I don't know. We're around maybe 500-ish employees that we've gotten through of the 11,000. What do you see first are some of the unique challenges, but some of the obstacles that you've encountered, Nicolle, on getting out the director's message?
The same reason why this work is important is the same reason we have obstacles. It's the people, right? Because when you start to talk about trauma informed care and practices, it really is making people intentionally have a mindset shift. And change is hard. Small change is hard for any of us. And so if you were kind of raised not to talk about your feelings, if you were raised to bottle it up, we are asking people to look at their life and how they've moved and navigated life in a different way. And that's difficult. So our motivation sometimes is the same obstacle, and it's just the people. When you are talking about over 11,000, I think we're at about 11,500 staff across the state of Ohio. And Ohio is a diverse state with rural communities, urban communities. We bring a lot of things with us, our learned cultures. And so we're asking people to wait, just pause, and think about shifting the way that you think, thinking about being more inclusive, thinking about taking care of yourself. That's not something that we were really taught either. It's just about self-care. So it's difficult, right? Any change is going to be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, just from the outside, right? I every time it's kind of and we talk about this that the employees there have been going through a 3-day training, a 3-day process. They come in day 1 and we get a lot of I'm just here to see what's going on. I wanted 3 days out of the facility, right? Like we've kind of heard some of those I don't know if I really think this is a good idea. Uh nervousness that goes into day 2. We always talk about it. Day 2 goes into a really high intense. Is this about the inmates? Which is a question that we've talked about. We're like, no, this is about you, how you treat each other, how you treat your colleagues. And then something typically happens for people, either day 2 or day 3. It just depends on the person. And then they go, wait, this is about me. Like there is this shift from this is about me just trying to accomplish something for work that work's saying I need to do to, oh, I have to look at maybe some of the things that have happened to me, both inside the organization and outside the organization, that are affecting how I'm viewing the whole entire world. It's really a profound thing to, I think for our listeners, like if you haven't been through that process, it's so hard to explain what it's like. But you and I have said it time again. I remember doing the first training and you were like, are they all going to be like this? And I was like, pretty much. Yeah, it follows kind of this trend. And I think now that we're, I don't know, 7, 8 into them, you're like, yeah, it's exactly the same each time, even though they're a new, unique group of people and individuals and experiences, that those experiences are different, but that process of learning remains the same.
Yeah, and that's been really interesting to see, especially because we have such a diverse group of people, but you see the same pattern happening, even though the room always looks different. The audience looks different, but the same thing happens every time. It's the aha moments, right? Is what I call them. And what you find is that people initially come into this training expecting it to just be like any other training we have. We're a training heavy agency, so they expect it to be a just like anything else, and they expect it to be, even though it's very clear in everything that's been put out that it's about employees, they immediately expect that this is something about the benefit to the incarcerated before employees. And so they come in day 1 and hear that this is about them, and immediately their guards go up, and there's a little element of mistrust, like, wait a minute, why are we here, right? By day 2, they start to really build almost a community within the training. I mean, the work that we do in the training really does help with that process, right? That's, you do that intentionally. But they start to build this community so their guard is let down. They allow those vulnerabilities to come through. And that's when the connection, that's when the magic happens, because they're connecting with each other. They're beginning to share stories and really beginning to see that they're not in this alone.
I'm wondering, Nicolle, because you have so many years at ODRC, from your perspective, thinking about your time as a deputy warden, and even before you became a deputy warden, to now doing the work that you do on the employee services team, like, what do you see? How has trauma informed changed your interaction with your colleagues? Like, how do you, and maybe you'd be even willing to share a story like of things that happened before understanding this, where you're like, oh, I'd like to go do that differently now with this information. But I'm just curious about how your perspective has changed from that time in your career.
Yeah, I often tell this story when I am speaking to people because it's just honest, genuine, and it's just showing you that I was not always perfect. I didn't always practice this. It's been a shift. But when I was a deputy warden at Marion, a deputy warden's position, as many of them are in the institutions, are very busy. We have a million policies to follow. We have, 400 staff, 2,000 offenders. And so you're just constantly putting out fires, answering questions. And oftentimes I would find myself doing things like, my employees would come into my office and they'd say, hey, I have this issue. And I would be typing the email, Shen. Come on, get it through, right? Got to go to the next meeting. Let's go. And it wasn't until I truly had my own like personal crisis while I worked at MCI, and I was kind of a mess, right? And I wasn't focused. I wasn't on my game at work, and because I had too many things going on in my personal life. And it really made me have pause and have the aha moment. If this is happening to me, someone who's tenured, someone who has experience, somebody who's always been able to have the game face, but I am like feeling a little broken and lost, then it's happening to the employees, it's happening to the staff. And what do you need in this moment? I had to ask myself, what would you need in this moment? And I said, I need time. I need space. I need somebody to just ask if I'm okay. And I really, because of my experience with that, became more engaged with the employees there, became more empathetic. So if I saw that somebody was off their game, I wouldn't just start to criticize. I would say, hey, what's going on? How are things at home? So it wasn't necessarily that I was so educated in the language of trauma, but I knew that I just needed to take care of people, right? It is about the people and the connection.
Yeah, I mean, we say it all the time. Relationship, relationship, relationship. Like, do you know the people you work with? And for our listeners, I'll just say it time and time again. Before you even think about taking on any trauma-informed tools, practices, training, whatever it is, it's like, know the people. Just get to know, like, if you're like, hey, we don't have a lot of money, we don't have a lot of resources, you don't need them. Just get to know each other. Like, just make space and time for that. Because as we hear all the time is, this is all great, but there's no time. And you said it, even talking about that deputy warden position. There's so many other things to do. But the truth is if we can't make time for each other, there's no time for 1,000 policies or one policy. Like, if you don't know each other, you'll never get to implementing the policy anyway.
And in this environment, the trusting each other and knowing each other is so critical. It's critical for physical safety and the psychological safety because it is hard work. One of the things, as silly as it is, that I implemented during that time was, we are oftentimes so focused on what's going wrong or what needs improved. One thing I started doing in staff meetings is I would listen to the concerns and the events and all the things that needed to be done, but I also said, what do you need for help? And then I would say, let's give somebody kudos. Every staff meeting, give one of your staff kudos. And then I would end with a motivational quote. And although that is so simple and may seem silly, I saw the shift in people just to be able to say, hey, my employee bought in donuts today and everyone was happy and it was great. And we'd say, yay, great job, just something as silly as that. But it allowed this opportunity, number one, that it wasn't just always about criticism. We were celebrating some of the victories, even though it may have only been donuts that day, but we were going to celebrate those victories. And I just start to see the shift in that. And I knew that it was important. It was important.
Yeah, Nicolle, I thank you so much for bringing up the praise piece of that, because that is another really critical piece. Like, know your people and give way more praise than criticism. Like, I cannot tell you, just from managing my own team, and like you, Nicolle, I wish I could go back and do some management days over in my old days, because I didn't understand it, right? And it wasn't until I had my own sort of come to Jesus moment where I was like, this is not working any longer, my own personal crisis. But praise, every time I do it, I get better at it. That's the first thing, because I'm not always, and you and I have had private conversations, like, it's not always our comfort lane for you and I. Like, we're like, here's how we can improve, and here's the 75,000 things we can do to improve. But every time I do it, I'm like, okay, Sean, that's the right, like do more of that. And I now find myself looking for reasons, because I just see how motivated the staff is and how eager they are to then own the work that they produce, right? And take ownership of it, which I think is so, so critical. So another really good tip. Nicolle, anything from training that sticks out for you about an aha that some of the staff members have had, even just during the process of training about doing this work, that you want to share?
I think that some of the greatest aha moments are the simple things, and some of them we've already discussed, but once they're in the chairs and they're like, whoa, this isn't about the incarcerated, this is about me. And you see it over the 3 days, they start to think differently. They start to say, oh, people do care. The connection with their communities where they have these shared experiences. and they take the time, quite honestly, because they are removed from the institutions and their work for 3 days. They have the time to just breathe, to pause, and actually make connection. And to me, that is like the most valuable thing. Just some other things is we don't typically have training in our agency that allows you to start to examine your personal life and your families. And so I think that it is like beautiful, although some of the stories sometimes are really painful stories, but that people can then relate the training that they're receiving back and say, oh, I'm making a mistake with my child. I've made a mistake with my grandchild. I need to be better there, right? So it's about opening them up to learning, again, shifting the mindset. It's going to benefit us at work, right? It's going to. If everyone buys into it, we will benefit. Our agency's culture will change, the offenders will change, but it's the personal part that they get to take it home and improve their own lives. That it's just been amazing to see. And the fact that they're willing to share their stories. It's been beautiful.
It's been really beautiful. The thing that strikes me every time is, we teach community meeting as one of the tools in the training, right? A lot of people know that I do some training in correctional and work with you, and they're always like, "You do this even there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we do it everywhere we go." And I think people might want to hear about that experience, Nicolle, because I think asking, "How are you feeling?" in a correctional setting probably feels like the most unlikely place we might hear that, right? Like if you listed out all the work landscapes, I'm pretty sure corrections would probably fall close to the bottom of that list on places you might hear, how are you feeling? But I've seen some phenomenal shifts and we've heard some phenomenal stories about people who also thought, this is nuts, this is never going to work. And then they've tried it and they've had some pretty big shifts and some pretty big ahas, just on owning how they feel and asking other people how they feel.
One of the first places that we, as an agency, well, really, it was the people that went through the training and went back to their institution and started community meetings was Mansfield Correctional Institution, which is a level 3 higher security facility. It's kind of the facility that, you don't typically think about feelings, right? Everyone needs to be tough and strong.
And just shout out, because I love my Mansfield folks, by the way. I feel like they've challenged me in ways that I don't always get challenged in. So I especially love my Mansfield folks. But go ahead, Nicolle.
Yeah, and they were the ones that went through that initial training the first year from Mansfield Correctional. They were so committed and so passionate because they truly believed in it and they truly believe in people and in change. And they went back to the facility and everyone was saying, not at Mansfield, this will never work. But they just started implementing community meetings. The only change that they tried out the gate in their executive staff meeting, in their unit management staff meetings. And they said, yeah, people grumbled. Of course, they grumbled. They didn't want to do it. They made jokes about it, but they still committed to do it. And then all of a sudden, it became so natural to them. We would go into meetings and the staff would pull out their feelings wheels. I had a different training, and there was a person from Mansfield, a lieutenant there, and he opened his book, and there was a feelings wheel in his book that he had. He was carrying it to different trainings with him. And so it just gave me hope that, this tough facility where everyone thinks is so tough and hard, and everyone said, oh, nobody at Mansfield will do it or buy into it. They did it. They went back, just that one thing. And now it's become more commonplace that people walk through the institution and say, how are you feeling? And allow a space to be able to talk about that. I just think it was great. We've also, of course, in my area implemented community meetings, but it's really helped me. We were already kind of an area that talked about feelings, but to be more intentional about it. And when you ask people, what does support look like? Who can you go to for support? We were more uncomfortable with that piece, right? It's like to be able to say, I need help, I need assistance, I need support, and then to name a person, that was a little bit uncomfortable for us. And so what you find is just over time is that practice makes perfect. and until you have to be uncomfortable to get comfortable. So it wasn't until we just started using it and practicing it. Now we implement community meetings. We start doing them when we start trainings now. So it's becoming just an environment where it is safe to talk about your feelings. People now have feelings wheel hanging up in their institutions on posters. You see them carrying them in binders. And even though the number compared to 11,000 may be small, that small group of people will keep that momentum going. That will allow somebody the space where they may never have felt comfortable to say, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm sad. I'm lonely. It's allowing them that space to talk. And even though the ripple may be a little small, may not be at the pace sometimes that I want it, it's happening. It's occurring.
So I love that when you say it's maybe not at the pace that I want it to happen at. We'll talk about pole in just a second. But you hit on something else there, Nicolle, which is like everyone gets afraid about how are you feeling because feelings make us nervous. We think, oh no, am I going to have therapy? Do I have to fix this person's feelings? But as we get more accustomed to kind of owning our feeling, growing our emotional intelligence, all the fun things we love to say. What we begin to learn about community meeting is that it's actually what do I need to get out of our time together? I think the hardest question, relearning to ask for help, right? Like so many of us have been let down by folks. So like we've asked for help, we haven't gotten it at all, or we didn't get it in the way that we really needed it, right? Like someone gave us advice that wasn't helpful, like all the ways in which people can let us down sometimes. Or, I always talk about the high school group project where nobody did their work, although nobody identifies as the person who didn't do the work. We all identify as the person stuck doing all of the work somehow. We've all lost touch with that. But that to me, those other two questions, right? Like the feelings questions opens up, this is a safe place that maybe I can start leaning into. But it's the next two questions that really begin to build those professional relationships and realizing maybe some healthier boundaries, especially in the workplace, instead of just bringing in our maybe unhealthy family boundaries into the workplace, which is where most of us learn about relationships that are in these family settings. So I'm just wondering as well, like, have you noticed other changes? Like, first off, my heart sings hearing that Mansfield is doing, I didn't know they were doing the community meeting that deeply, but it makes my heart sing. I get notes oftentimes from the chaplains, librarians, other staff who are like, this has been amazing. This has been like super. So now my heart's singing with all my Mansfield folks. But what other changes have you noticed in the workplace culture specifically, Nicolle, since we started this project?
Well, I think that, the changes started right when we got appointed our director, Annette Chambers Smith, with the creation of those core values. And then as you begin to think, these aren't just values that are, like the traditional, every agency has core values. You might have the posters and all the things, but she actually believes this. It's a part of who she is as a person, I think, and she really lives and breathes these core values. This is who she is, and this is her expectation. And when you have a core value, something like civility towards all, it allows space for those because, we have a lot of great people in our agency that are thoughtful and caring and empathetic, but it allowed a space for them to kind of be more intentional. And it allowed this space where we could feel a little vulnerable. And then you top that with the trauma informed training where it's just really kind of getting it more embedded into the thinking and you're learning like why it's the why behind it, why it's important, and learning kind of the science behind it and everything. And so you get even more buy-in like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't just words on the wall, this is for a purpose. And you see those aha moments in the training where people are starting to tie those things together. And the shift that I would say that I see is primarily, again, with just how we treat each other. The asking the question, how are you feeling, when you take the time to ask, not just ask for yourself, but ask others, how can I support you and what do you need in this moment? I think that's been great. I think that a lot of our employees that have gone through the training have shifted. Well, first of all, they recognize that they were fixers or rescuers and have shifted from always jumping in to fix things to asking those powerful questions. What do you need in this moment? How can I support you? What does it look like for you if this is successful? And you can see that shift, and honestly, it allows them to free up some of their own time and allows them to get the pause because they're not taking so much time and energy to try to fix everyone else's issues. You see that as you walk through. You hear language being used. I get the opportunity to speak in front of some of our employees at different trainings and supervise the peer support program for our agency, which is over 150 employees. And you get to communicate with them and you start to hear them using the language and seeing the shift and just honestly being kinder to each other. And finally, I would say, that people are taking strides to be kinder to themselves. You all of a sudden see the improved self-care and the importance of that, and that the people are willing to say, whoo, I need to take a pause. I need to take a break. Um, Another thing that our agency has done in the recent years is we've created these spaces inside of each facility in the offices that we call wellness rooms, right? But it's a space that's created by employees for employees, that will allow people to have a place to take a break and to, whatever's going on, if there's some crisis in the institution, or maybe it's a personal crisis, they have this space that they can go that the employees have really worked hard to make comfortable. So they have cozy chairs, they have water often, they usually have softer lighting, right? Feels more like you're in your living room. But the importance of those spaces is that you can take that moment to separate from the work you're doing and to take that pause, to take deep breaths, to practice some mindfulness, which they're learning as well, and just take care of yourself in that moment so that you can rebuild that energy to go out and do your job or to decide what you need in that moment for support. And that's a shift. That's a huge win. That's a huge win.
Yeah, and I love that you focused on the lighting because I think too, right? In the prisons, it's not the best light. Like it. I mean, talk about being under the lights, quite literally, and what that can do to you, right? Like just your physical body and not being connected to the outdoors, not always having windows, not always having access to that, the space of that. You said something else early there too that I want to come back to. Sort of talking about the reenactments and moving from rescuer to supporter. And I think that's such a big one for our listeners because, and I heard you say it, it's like, it's the lazy way. It's like all of a sudden you will have way less work to do if you stop trying to fix it for everybody. And not only is it less work for you, but it can actually be really empowering and more engaging for the other person, right? It's like, what do you need? What does that look like? Like versus, I think, Nicolle, you need all of these things and I'm just going to do it. And I say that because I know you're a person when you're like, when I say I don't need help, it means I don't need help. And so I think about that so often. It's like someone's trying to tell us what they need. And we're like, no, I know what you need. Let me fix this for you. You don't know what you need. I know what you need. And so I think that's an important thing for people who maybe feel like change takes too long. It doesn't have to take so long. Like we can make these shifts. We can see huge leaps, as you've mentioned, in a really short period of time. It's overall, all 11,000 employees, that's going to take a little bit more time, right? But we can start seeing these positive changes. And to be quite honest, when we begin seeing the little shifts, other staff's like, wait, I want to do it that way too. And it starts the parallel process. So even for folks who haven't had the opportunity to have the training, they'll still begin acting with the shifts that are happening for the people who've started the work already.
It is the little things and the little victories. And, for me, and I'm sure for you at a certain time in your life, we're big picture thinkers. And so it's like, how do we get this accomplished? And we're task oriented. We want to move forward. We want to see progress. And it's not always easy to see that progress right away when you're talking about cultural shifts. So you have to really start to focus on those smaller victories and the conversations that people are having. And it's not necessarily something that you can easily just track and quantify, right? It is just in the feeling that you have in an environment. It's in how you're greeted when you walk into a prison, how when you're interacting with somebody that works in the adult parole authority, how are they interacting with each other? How are they interacting with their supervisees? You have to really be able to kind of slow your thinking down of what progress looks like and understand that the progress is happening just in those conversations, just in how people are greeting each other. That is the progress, and it is catching on. There are many people that don't go, that haven't gone through the training that are openly talking about feelings, or you may say something, they'll say, "Oh, is this that feeling stuff?" in a joking way, but they're having the conversation and they know about it, right? It is those small things, and you need to, well, speaking for myself, I need to learn really to celebrate those things and celebrate those little strides that we are moving towards to make that shift.
Yeah. Thanks for the reminder, Nicolle, for myself, because you're right. I work in big systems all the time, and I'm just like, ah, just can we get to the good part, right? Like, and listen, I know that it's 5 to 6 years, like realistically, but I also know what the good part looks like. And so, my spouse hears me say this all the time, like, if they would just listen to me and stop arguing, like we could be to the good part already. But everyone has to go through that journey, right? Like everyone has to have the experience. And without the experience, you're not going to get there. So it is this slow journey piece. I want to ask you something else, and you may or may not have the answer to this, Nicolle, but you were talking earlier about being the deputy warden and the thousands of policies that you're working in. Corrections is a huge policy driven system, no matter where you look at it around the country. I'm just wondering, have you seen trauma informed care influence any policies, or are there policies you wish we could revise through the trauma informed list? Like maybe you have a wish list of like, could we relook at least this one policy or these three policies? Or have you seen new policies come out that are more trauma informed?
Again, I have to give some kudos to our director because she actually reviews every policy. And so I think that she is starting to set the tone and has set the tone over the years to really examine things and make sure that we're not causing any kind of emotional or physical harm for our employees or the incarcerated. But I will tell you that a goal for our trauma informed leadership team in 2025 is to be more intentional about reviewing those policies. So now our team has actually, by quarter, divided up policies that we are going to review closely and then make recommendations as a group to our policy coordinator to make sure that we, again, are just having that. We're having our eye after having the training, after doing deeper dive about the work, that our eyes are going to look at every single policy as well and just say, hey, here's a recommendation. Maybe this could be tweaked. I do think that our policies are already going in that direction. We do it well. We do a lot of these practices well. It's just about continuing the growth and continuing the education piece and just revisiting, right? Because what you knew a year ago is different than what you know this year. And so just being more intentional about the policies, because they do help set the tone, right? And how our work environments are. So we're going to be more intentional with that in 2025.
And I think it's a big deal, especially for those who are maybe unsure about trauma informed, right? The policies can be really helpful in that if they're just naturally built in, and that's now we got to do it. It helps, I think, get the buy-in because now there's not the choice, right? Versus it just being like, oh, I don't want to participate. It's like, no, it's the policy. Like we got to do it this way. So I think that's a really interesting one. Sort of kind of a two-part question here, and then we're going to get to some quick fires in just a second, Nicolle. But how has working in trauma informed changed your view of corrections and just in general, not even necessarily at ODRC, but like how has it changed how you view corrections?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say again, it is realizing that there's really no divide. That people are people. And honestly, it just made me realize truly after hearing stories and working with the incarcerated and listening to their stories, and I know it's going to sound like an easy answer, but that we are really more alike. We have more in common than we don't. And if you truly, I mean, I go back to what you're taught by your grandmothers and your mothers in the world, that, the golden rule, right? Treat people how you want to be treated. It seems so simple, but we oftentimes do it wrong or not well. And it really goes back to that. And the people are not just our coworkers, but those that we serve as well, right? Civility towards all, hope for all, take care of all. In that, when you really, again, take a moment, pause, and start to think about the stories that you've heard, the stories of employees incarcerated, we are so connected. We are so much alike. Um, we're not different. We all want the same things. We want connection. We want belonging. We want to be heard. We want to feel safe, right? We want to be able to be free to express our feelings. And I mean, it seems simple, but it really isn't, right? It's hard work, but it is just that simple. People are people. We are one, and our connection is strong, and those relationships mean everything.
If we have people listening that maybe are working in other correctional facilities in other states, are maybe in the court system or as part of ODRC, we work with lots of parole officers. So I know we have other parole officers and other probation officers in other states who are likely listening. What advice would you give them to start? Like if they were like, if their director came to them and said, we're going to go do this thing, Nicolle, what would be the advice you would give them?
I would tell them to allow the space to be creative. So again, I've said this many times, but it's like allow yourself the pause to really be able to think it through. And then first start with those relationships, building connections and building trust with employees. And I'm saying all employees, executive level to entry level, get out and meet people where they are, listen to their stories. When people are disgruntled or angry or they say morale is bad, ask them why. Ask them what does that look like for them, and really get to hear their stories, and that will help you build your program, your policies, whatever you call it for your agency. Build it around what you hear and what people need, right? And be creative, be flexible, be able to be wrong, right? You're not going to always get it right. And just know, because I know that in corrections, we always feel like we've got to keep moving and we got to go fast and we got to get the end product, is be willing to slow down and have space to even have the thoughts and to be creative and make plans. And it's not easy. There will be crises that arise that will maybe like sidetrack you for a while, but be willing to go back and really just take it slow.
Pole pole, slowly, slowly. I can't wait to ask you quick fire, but before that, what's been the one unexpected lesson you've learned about yourself in this process, Nicolle?
Whew. Wow, Shen.
Before you even answer that, because I'm going to say this, I have watched you from the outside immensely change in the 2 years that I've known you. You are not the same woman I met 2 years ago in Mansfield, Ohio. Like you are. So I just want to share that from you. I have watched you transition. And listen, you are a wonderful human being 2 years ago, but I would say you are a beautiful human being inside and out 2 years removed. Like I have watched you do a lot of really hard work. So it's why I'm asking the question. I'm curious if you've noticed an unexpected change in yourself.
Yes, I have. And I would say that we talked about being the fixer or the rescuer. I felt that, that was kind of who I was. It was just my personality. And
Yeah, because you were also the rescuer to your family.
yeah, right. So you just kind of get trapped in that reenactment. You get trapped in those roles. And I had to start to really re-examine myself, like be honest with myself that I was getting something from that too. It wasn't just that everyone was so messed up or confused or needed help or didn't know how to do something. The Me jumping in to assist, I was getting something from that too, and it wasn't very healthy for them or for me. And so that's probably been the biggest shift where I have started to, say no a little bit more, have some boundaries, both professionally and personally more. Um, that's been huge for me. It's been freeing for me. It's allowed me some more time, right? More time for myself, to gain more knowledge in my career and just for self-care. And I also, and I've had this conversation with you several times, but it has changed the way that I parent my son, a boy, and allowing him the space to have feelings, to cry, to show emotion. And to change the conversation, I used to always say, "How was your day?" And he'd say, "Good," like any kid. And I would let it slide with that. And so now he's prepared that he's going to hear, "How are you feeling?" Or if he comes home and he's upset and I'm saying, "You look like you're having some big feelings. What's going on? How are you feeling?" And he knows that good is not a feeling. So, so it's been, to see the shift in myself, the shift in my son, the shift at work. It gives you proof that this work is real and it does work. You have to do the work, but it's been life changing. It's shifted my mindset.
As a mom, thank you for raising an emotionally intelligent young man. Like I think that's the most critical work. Like that may be the biggest gift as parents we could give the world. The legacy we could give is if we just have emotionally intelligent children. And especially because you're raising a boy, I'm going to especially say having boys who can talk about feelings, young men who can talk about feelings. I think that's why I'm so excited for the new generation. I can't wait. I can't wait for them to take over.
So imagine if, we had this opportunity to allow the people that we incarcerate, the people that we are serving, those men and those women, if we just give them a space, right, as well, to just be able to be a little bit vulnerable and express themselves and feelings. Like that's the end goal, right? And that's true rehabilitation.
Say it for all the folks. Can we ask them also to fund it? Can we get some funding to support the work, Nicolle? Like this is Nicolle and I spend a lot of our time just talking about who will give us the money. We know it's the right thing, but how will we fund it so we can get employees to go to a 3-day training? Like it takes some effort. Nicolle, it's a pleasure having you on. First off, for our listeners, I could have dinner with Nicolle every night and we would find something great to talk about. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have the podcast. But Nicolle, quick fire. Here's where it gets dangerous with you.
This is where I'm really nervous.
Yeah, right? Like we'll talk about trauma informed all day. Hey, what's the book or TV show that's caught your attention? Why is it standing out for you? And I've already given our listeners a warning. If you watch anything Nicolle tells you, prepare to be mad.
I watch a lot of documentaries, but I've just recently gotten into this show. I believe it's on Apple, called Disclaimer. Have you heard of this?
No, but here I go.
It's just really interesting. It is fictional, but it's just a really interesting story about how, your decisions and the way you move in life really can impact other people around you and maybe people that you don't know. And it really is the character, the woman is really having to be forced to really do some self-examination. And so the story is really interesting and really twisted, but it is a real insight to just like humans, right? Where we mess up, our search for redemption.
I'm going to watch it. I'm going to put on your list Industry, which is one I've just started watching.
Oh, let me write this down.
This is what happens when Nicolle and I are together. Is she'll text me later and say, oh, "Shed, what did you do to me?" Okay. Dinner with any historical or contemporary leader. Who would you choose? But what's the one question? Because you got all your powerful questions. What's the one question you want to ask them, Nicolle?
I would have to go with, of course, Martin Luther King Jr. Or former President Barack Obama. Can I have two?
You can't have two.
But it's really because of the same reason. I just feel like, of course, they were leaders in advocating for marginalized people, but I would ask them not really about that process, but what is the burden of like feeling like you're carrying so many and carrying so many people's dreams and that you are changing the culture of the United States of America. What does that feel like, and how did you like reset? You know? That would be what I would want to know from them. What did you do for self-care? How did that feel?
Yeah, I often wonder, especially with President Obama, like the reset of so much in the public eye. And I get that he's in the public eye now, but not as much as when you are president, right? Like, what is also that shift? Like coming into the public eye, because really he was a senator, most people didn't know. Then a huge spotlight of being president for 8 years to back to kind of a much more quiet, like, and still having the burdens though. But now also you were president, you probably know a lot of things I don't want to know, I'm pretty sure, but like all the things you know, I'm with you.
How did they keep those family relate? I mean, they were both raising children at that time. Young children had marriages. Like, that's a lot of burden. Like, I just want to know what's like the magic sauce there. And
It's a good question because I feel like I can't even get my grocery shopping done some days. So like
right.
yeah, I agree. What's filling you with joy? What's the hobby or activity that just makes your heart?
I've really started focusing more on just being kind of still because, as you know, another shift that's happened since we met, I was always busying myself with community activities, the activities of my child, all the things, right? Schedule so busy. And so when I have time to myself, I just kind of have allowed myself to just be still. It's very uncomfortable for me, I'm not gonna lie, but I'm working on it. I'm really working on it because I know the importance of it. And then I guess part of that and being still is I've really have started dabbling in and really want to explore yoga, right? Yoga, and a dear friend of mine owns a studio in my hometown, and so I really have started to just take the time, go and just try the practice, even though I'm not good at it. It just allows, like, again, that kind of quiet space to re-engage with your body. And so that's what I'm trying. I'm trying, Shin.
Nicolle, I'm so proud of you. I want to come do yoga with you.
Come.
I've been out of touch with my own practice. It's time. See, you're invigorating me to get back together. What else would you like to tell listeners? What should they know?
If I could leave with anything, it's just, when times are tough and you think that you are alone, honestly, in this work, in your life, that connection is so important, and don't be lonely and don't feel like you have to always be strong. That vulnerability is so freeing, and the asking for help or support is so freeing that at home, at work, do that.
And that, my friends, is why I call Nicolle a friend. I think she reminds me of the things just as much as I remind her of the things. Nicolle, pleasure having you on the show. I'm going to have you on again because we're going to get an update about what is happening. Because some of the stuff we didn't talk about is like, what do you see for the future? What do you want to do? I know you guys are trying to figure that out right now, so I'm not putting you on the spot with it. But I want people to understand what a long journey this is as well. So we can't wait to have you. Nicolle was a little nervous about coming on. Now I'm like telling her, now it's going to be a part 2, Nicolle. So you'll have to come back again.
Nothing like leaving on another nervous note, right?
Nicole's come to expect it from me. Never know what's going to come out of Shen's mouth. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll put links to Nicole's LinkedIn, how you can get in touch with her. We'll put links to disclaimer and industry and all the stuff we talk about in the show notes as well. Thanks for tuning into Mindful Management, creating a trauma-informed work environment. If you need more resources, free tools, that's right, free, FREE, head over to chefaloconsulting.com. We've got you covered. If you've enjoyed today's discussion, show your support, like, comment, follow. Let's make Nicolle go viral. Then we'll really make her nervous. We'd love it. Review the episode on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and brings even better content your way. Imagine what it would be like if we lived in a world where all of our corrections and rehabilitation services were trauma informed. What would that look like? How would our world change? Just imagine the possibilities. We love having you with us. Thanks again for listening. We can't wait until next time. And remember, we can do hard things. Slowly, slowly we go. Thanks, Nicolle. Thanks for being a part.
Thank you.
Mindful Management, creating a trauma-informed work environment, is brought to you by Chefalo Consulting. To learn more about Chefalo Consulting and our trauma-informed change management and professional development solutions, please visit chefaloconsulting.com. That's Chefalo, CHEFALO, consulting.com. Make sure you don't miss these transformative conversations by subscribing to Mindful Management wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for listening. And remember, change happens one step at a time.